and welcome to China Insight. I'm Britton Clennett. Today we're asking if blind students should be taught in mainstream classrooms or whether they should attend special schools. And to help me get to the bottom of that question is Ni Jin, an expert on the topic. Welcome, Ni Jin.
Hello, Britt.
Now, you lost your eyesight in your early childhood, didn't you? So what was it like for your parents when it came to choosing options for schooling?
They were actually very anxious about my schooling, and they thought I would have no way to go to school. But actually at that moment I had a relative teaching in a local school, and she suggested maybe she could make every effort to put me in a mainstream school. But later on we found that's almost impossible because you don't have experience in teaching blind students. And luckily about 4 years later, my parents had a friend who came to them saying, I'm teaching now in a blind school, so do you want to send your child there? And my parents were, very curious about that, also very anxious because the school was far away from home. And they were thinking, and yeah, it's good to have an opportunity for this child, but on the other side, they are thinking, whether that's a proper school.
At that time, was the option of inclusive schools available to you?
No, and actually at that moment, I would think from now, throughout the whole country, inclusive education wasn't available at the moment.
Okay, well, of course, it is available now. Martin Pollard took to the streets of Beijing to ask whether blind students should attend special schools or attend school with everyone else. Let's check out what he found out.
Experts often say that society's attitudes are a barrier to equal treatment for persons with disabilities. We ran a mini-survey and discovered that some, especially younger members of the public, were in favour of an inclusive education.
上普通学校这样接触到就是更多同学，然后关心。我觉得就是可以在普通的学校里面就设一个特设的班，就是不用把他们从我们之中划分出去，而是要就是包容他们，但是同时也要给予他们一些就是特殊的帮助。
But the majority felt special schools would be more suitable.
上特殊学校吧，这样对他们也有点好处，因为大部分都是他们在一起，不会有太多的沟通方面的不方便。
特殊学校呗，他毕竟有特殊的需要。
黑板上也看不见，书也看不见，所以他上盲人学校，他有一个盲文啊，他可以用手来摸那个盲文。
我认为应该上特殊学校，因为他们毕竟和普通人有一定的距离，那么他很容易在普通学校里头有意无意的会受到一些心理上的不愉快吧，就算是。
This is the Beijing School for the Blind. Established in 1874 by a Scottish missionary, it's one of the oldest and most prestigious special schools in the country. Students on the special education programme, like all students in China, are entitled to 9 years of compulsory and free education. They take most of the same core subjects, but the emphasis is more on developing practical life skills and less on exams and homework. Most students here board at the school. Once a week, these pupils have English conversation class with American student volunteer Zachary.
Because they have this difficulty, they are able to kind of work to compensate for that, and I think their ability to memorize is a lot stronger than maybe some sighted students might be, who can just look something up very easily if they forget it. And I think also just the motivation in this class is really, really high. I think it's wonderful. So,
yeah. Also, maybe doing it like that forces teachers to make the class more conversational.
Right. I think that's definitely true. I think when you can't focus on reading quite as much as you might be able to in another class, it's all oral, which kind of helps with the ability to get more comfortable speaking English, but also to have more authentic sounding English than you might in other classes.
The permanent members of staff, though, like English teacher Chen Zhuo, must learn additional skills before starting here.
So like students all over China, the students at this school also have an English textbook It says English. But inside, it looks a bit different. We can see they've got Braille here. And this is what Miss Chun will be teaching them as part of her course.
Okay.
This is what have we got here?
There are 6 points here. This is L.
And this is O.
Oh, yeah. This is O. This is O. O. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, I can sort of see that. How long does it usually take people to learn Braille?
Very short. If you learn it, you can take 1 day to know the 6 points, but you have to remember it in about 1 week.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have hope still.
Sport is emphasised here. Students have PE class where they run, skip, play table tennis, goalball, and a version of the beautiful game, blind football. This form of the game is now a Paralympic sport. Ball bearings are inserted into the ball so players can locate it by listening. Leading the training session is one of the school's PE teachers and chief football coach, Liu Dong. He came across the game as a student when the school was looking for goalkeepers for a tournament. He's had to adapt his coaching methods to suit his players. Here we can see him explaining to one of his players about using the instep of his feet to control the ball. His players love it. Liu tells me they've gained confidence and a whole lot more.
身体这是一方面的，肯定会强壮，老这么训练，但是拼搏精神是比较重要，因为尤其足球这个项目，它是有身体对抗的，而且在这个比赛当中，就是在团队一块大家协作配合这方面，就是锻炼的比较多。
The star player here and team captain is 16-year-old Xue Minhui from Fujian. He's played the game for 6 years.
想打一次残奥会的比赛，
你觉得你有希望吗？
我觉得好好练应该都会有吧。
Special schools have offered students with disabilities in China an education where previously there was none. But for many disability rights campaigners like Fu Gaoshan, special schools should now be phased out in favour of an inclusive education. In part through luck, not registering his disability and his parents' efforts, Fu managed to get an education in mainstream schools. Though it wasn't always easy, he has no regrets. Many of the visually impaired he encounters across China have been to special schools though, and he can see the difference.
其实被隔离以后，他会有很多表现，就比如说对主流的一些情况的了解，包括对于换位思考等等的，包括一些技能啊，在社会上适应环境的一些技能啊等等的。
In light of these problems, there are plans afoot for special schools to become resource centres for inclusive education in mainstream schools. This is already happening in highly developed cities like Beijing. But elsewhere, the building of special schools continues apace.
So, was that what it was like for you at school? Was your school like Beijing School of the Blind?
Not really.
No.
No.
How?
Well, you know, when in the 1990s, blind schools, I mean the local blind schools, had poor conditions. The food wasn't really good, and we didn't have football, and we, you know, was less fancy than, you know, what we said, you know, what we saw in the video program.
Mm-hmm. What was your curriculum like? Did you have PE lessons like they did?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Our curriculum was copied from the mainstream schools, but we've spent lots of time in studying Braille, writing and reading, because, you know, the teacher in the TV said, you know, it's very quick for children to study Braille. That's true, but, you know, the problem is at the local level. For example, me, I had some classmates who were nearly 20 years old, who just attended the school because, you know, before that they didn't know there was a school for blind, or they just lost their eyesight. So for students who were not at the schooling age, it was very challenging for them to study Braille. I even have some classmates who couldn't read and write Braille until 4 or 5 years later.
Right. Were your teachers blind or visually impaired?
No, at the moment, no. Later on, my alma mater had one blind teacher, and later on they had 2. So.
Right. You, of course, went to school in Qingdao, which was how far from your house?
I had to take bus for 1 or 2 hours.
Right.
Then I had to take train for 6 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think that having that distance segregated you?
Yeah, for sure. But I have to say, sometimes when we talk about segregation, it seems it must be a bad thing, and I almost agree with that. But when teachers really care, things can be made much better and much easier.
At that time, was the government's Sui Ban Jiu Du policy available? It wasn't.
Yeah, it was available, and Sui Ban Jiu Du was available from the mid of 1980s.
Okay, well, we're going to talk a little bit more about the government's inclusive education policy after the break. Hello and welcome back to China Insight. We've been discussing education for the blind, and I'm joined by Ni Zhen, who's helping me weigh up whether blind students should be educated with everyone else. Ni Zhen, you tried to get into a mainstream school at one point. Can you describe what that was like?
The first attempt was made when I was in my second year in high school. I wanted to go to a mainstream university rather than a special university.
Could you remind us, what is the policy in the country towards blind students getting into university?
According to law, it didn't say, blind students were forbidden to go to mainstream universities. However, in practice, in the reality, we only had special university. We call it 特殊教育学院, which was a special college in a mainstream university.
Okay, well, let's talk about that a little bit later. First of all, Martin Pollard spoke to a visually impaired teenager who is attending a mainstream school. Let's find out what he discovered.
Daily morning exercises, a reality for all Chinese school children. Some like it, some find it a chore. 14-year-old Zhao Chen wouldn't know. His school and parents won't let him take part for safety reasons. He is blind in one eye and in the other has vision of only 0.01. But he is grateful enough that the school will allow him to attend classes. Zhao is benefiting from China's principal inclusive education policy, Sui Ban Jiu Du, or learning in regular classrooms. Students with disabilities are allowed to take part in mainstream classes, but their marks don't count towards teacher or school performance. Zhao Chen loves learning about the wider world. Here, he's sharing some of his findings on Iceland and its volcanoes. Like many students with disabilities, what he craves most of all is complete inclusion, to feel like he's being given all the same opportunities as his classmates. Zhao Chen tells me that here he feels about 60 to 70% included. If he could have a bit more support, his studies would be a lot easier.
比如说讲课的时候，他尽量多的把黑板上的那些题说出来，尽量多的。当然现在的老师他很少会说出来，你要求他他也做不到，因为太多了。可以就是考试的时候尽量能够给我一些大字的卷子，或者是能够给我延长一些时间，因为我写得很慢。
His tutor, Li Dongjuan, says it's hard for busy teachers like her to meet Zhao Chun's special needs, but she does what she can.
比方说有些不会的问题，我会单独给他讲，因为他看不到嘛，他只能靠耳朵听。物理上涉及到很多的物理现象，他是看不到的，所以我只能通过语言给他描述。
Though it was a fight for Zhao to get into this school, he only attends school 2.5 days a week. According to China's inclusive education policy, teachers aren't required to set Zhao homework or formally assess him. This means there's the perverse situation of the more time he spends at school, the further he falls behind his classmates. So ever since he was little, his mum, Bin Bixia, has led his learning. Her homeschooling curriculum includes all core subjects, traditional Chinese culture, and Buddhism. She says children like her son need more creative teaching methods.
像比如这个数学的话，我没有要求他去做那么多作业，那么多题，然后我就是用提问的方式，让我知道他是否去掌握了这些知识，然后用口答的方式，他掌握了我就算他过了，是这样的。
Beijing Union University is where one of the leading experts on special education works. In 2008, China ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Article 24 says signatories shall ensure an inclusive education system at all levels. So does learning in regular classrooms count as an inclusive education?
随班就读呢，可能在起步的阶段呢，是一个好的一个容易起点比较低的一个形式。但是我们随着这个融合教育的发展的话，可能这种形式慢慢会要得到加强。就是一个班的资源来解决一个残疾孩子的特殊需求哈，可能是不够的。所以我们现在哈更希望不仅是一个班，而且是一个学校，而且在学校里面呢哈，我们要建一个资源教室，然后也要利用这个校外的一些资源。 来帮助残疾孩子来建立一个完整的知识系统。
The ultimate goal for the visually impaired in schools is to attend mainstream universities. But previously, accommodations weren't being provided for them to take the entrance exam, called the Gaokao. But then in June last year, following a landmark government announcement, 46-year-old masseur Li Jinsheng from Henan became the first blind student in China's history to take the Gaokao in Braille. Sadly, the fanfare was short-lived as he was unable to complete most of the papers. He says this is because his local education bureau didn't heed his request for electronic papers. Partially sighted Jiang Yaodong from Gansu had more luck. He was provided with enlarged print papers and allowed to use his magnifying device. His score was good enough to get him into some top schools, but they rejected him because of his impairment. Eventually, though, Hubei University of Chinese Medicine, a Tier 2 university, accepted him. He is now studying traditional Chinese medicine in the hope of qualifying as a doctor. If Zhao Chun one day makes it to mainstream university, he wouldn't mind doing broadcasting, but his top choice would be his biggest passion of all. This would, he hopes, take him far.
我就是想去，歌剧院去当一个扮演一个主角。
The road there will be long for Zhao. First up, before even the Gaokao, is the high school entrance exam or Zhongkao. Following that, he'll have to search for a high school. This may be hard because high schools, unlike primary and middle schools, are allowed to select their students.
Okay, well, China has this 随班就读 policy, which means learning in regular classrooms that obviously people like Zhao Chun are benefiting from. Could you explain a little bit about that policy and what your opinion is?
Learning in class was like the stage of integration rather than inclusion. It happened in 1960s or 1970s in Europe and America. So basically the differences between inclusive education and learning in regular class include the provision of support. For inclusion, students get reasonable accommodation. It means, you can get all support you need. And also, we don't, inclusive education, language is also important. We don't use regular class. By regular, it means a standard. So for inclusive education, there's no set standards for everybody. So everybody is equal. So you have your needs and I have my needs. So our needs are individualized, so the support must be individualized. But for learning in regular class, you don't have support, or you don't have enough support, or the support is very standardized, like putting in a first row, putting students somewhere where he or she can see the blackboard much easier. Like Zhao Chen, he's benefiting from the policy of learning in regular class. It's unfair to say he doesn't have any support. I believe his teachers must be very, very supportive to him. Right. However, there is a standard. You have to achieve this or have to achieve that, and you have to convince your classmates, you're equally competitive or equally capable. So, that's not easy for some people who are not outgoing and so who are not really independent and who don't have, this family which Zhao Chen has. Her mom is an expert on education, you can see. So, it's unfair.
She's taken it upon herself to homeschool him as well.
Yeah. It's unfair to ask individuals to take care of all of that and to shift the responsibility to individuals of children and to their families.
Do you think that blind students get marginalized in this system?
Yeah, for sure. Students easily get marginalized. As Martin said in the video, support provided for students is not counted in the performance of schools and teachers. That's something resulted from the very tech school oriented climate inside the school. So that's, if we can give a little bit flexibility and makes it more flexible and more friendly, things can be changed. Also, they talked about the Gaokao. They try to make Gaokao absolutely fair to all of us. To people with and without disabilities. It's very difficult for them to go further. Years ago, I took the English language test, IELTS, and the other, graduate school record examination, GRE. For those tests, I can feel, the text organizers were not worrying about the absolute fair to each person. For example, they gave time extension generously. I asked for double time, and they gave me.
And you did it in Braille, or
I did it in Braille. I did it in Braille, and I got the text paper in Braille, and I provided my answers on the computer.
So presumably you would need longer with Braille.
Yeah, definitely.
Does it take longer to read each word? Well, I'm sure it would, right?
Yeah, it definitely requires a longer time. It depends on your, familiarity with the Braille reading. For me, I need longer, and I asked for longer time, and they gave me. In China, we care too much about the score, and we care too much about the absolute fair and the confidentiality. So it's impossible for students with disabilities to have longer time.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to discuss Beijing's new policy of allowing guide dogs on public transport.
Okay.
welcome back to China Insight. With me is Ni Jun, and he's my expert on blind education in China. And as of May this year, guide dogs will be allowed on Beijing's public transport. In 2008, during the Olympics, Ping Ali was part of the torch relay, and she was with a dog, a guide dog, and they thought perhaps that it would signal a change in Beijing, and blind people would be allowed to bring guide dogs on the public transport networks. Now, that didn't change, but as of May this year, it will. Do you think this is a step forward for people, blind people who live in the city, and the accessibility that they'll have?
Yeah, for sure. That's a very progressive measure. However, I want to say, guide dogs should be allowed from the very beginning. And, we had the accessibility law from 2012. And in that law, it says guide dogs should be allowed. But we waited for 3 more years for that to come on the ground. And, though it's very progressive, I have to say, not many blind people can have guide dogs. I mean, if we really want to promote accessibility in the city, we'll have to make some more measures on top of that.
With this law, it doesn't actually apply during rush hour, and as we know very well, as anyone who has lived in Beijing know, rush hour can last all day in Beijing. It's quite a hectic train system. Do you think this is a problem?
It's unfair for guide dog owners, to be forbidden to go onto trains with the dogs in rushing hours. However, the situation in Beijing is very difficult. If you get your dogs with you on train during rush hours, it's very dangerous. I mean, for the safety of dog. Interestingly, in other countries, they had a test or competition between guide dog users and the cane users, and the result was, the cane users was more effective than guide users in accessing the environment.
Why is that?
Guide dog is like a upper class thing. When you use guide dogs, you are not pursuing higher speed. I mean, you are just enjoying the company of the guide dog. But for cane users, it's more flexible for them, and they can control better, of the direction and everything. For accessibility design, we had a basic idea. You have to design everything from the very beginning. Accessibility is not about building tactiles or building more roads. It's also about managing. It's about raising awareness. I mean, at the bottom of it is about respecting each other.
Okay, well, I think that's a good lesson for all of us and our attitudes towards disabled people in the city. That's unfortunately all we have time for today, but thank you for coming on the show. If you have any questions or comments, please reach us at the address shown below. And thank you for joining us on China Insight. We'll see you again for more stories and discussion about this rapidly changing country. Goodbye.